Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of Bogey Free. I am your host, Matt Jones, who you can find on Twitter at MattJonesTFR, and I am flying solo tonight. So you're stuck with me again, like a few weeks ago. As you can probably tell in my voice, I'm a little under the weather, so this will probably be a pretty quick show. But there's a tournament, and the show must go on. So we're powering through. Before we jump into the course, I do want to tell you about the RotoViz subscription that you can sign up for right now. It is $6.99 a month or $24.99 for the rest of the season. You get access to our tools, which include a splits app and a pivots app to find some GPP targets. It gets you the weekly course preview and trends article. It gets you a Yahoo article, which you should be playing on over there as well. And it gets you ownership projections for DK, the top 20 model, and something new that I'm rolling out this week as well, which I'll get into, I guess, as the show goes on. So make sure you head over there, rotoviz.com/golf, and you too can be a member and follow along. So we have our course this week. It is Hamilton Golf and Country Club. We've seen this course on tour before, but not for quite a while. It hasn't been played. Hasn't held a tour event since 2012. It's a shorter course. It's a par 70. It's just a shade under 7,000 yards. Bentgrass greens. There's a creek that crosses about half the holes. There is about 87 bunkers. Not about. There's actually exactly 87 bunkers at last check here. So a little bit of trouble. It feels like a week that we could probably see some low numbers. A couple of 62s or maybe a 61 would not be surprising at all for me here. We saw some pretty good scoring the last time that this event was held here back in 2012, and a little bit further back in 2006, I want to say. The winning score wasn't quite as low, but these, with the way that driving distance has taken over on a sub 7,000 yard track, you're definitely going to find some guys who just completely, overpower the course. So driving distance is something that I'm paying quite a bit of attention to this week. Obviously, the usual with greens and regulation are going to be important, but if there's a benefit on either of the off the tee stats, it's definitely distance this week. The three events that were held here, the driving distance was about double, 2 times as correlated to DK scoring as driving accuracy. So you're looking at pretty big importance, a pretty decent bump for those guys. And of course, we have a plethora of bombers to choose from this week, so we can definitely get into some of those guys in a little bit. We can start up at the top when we're looking at these, noteworthy options that we like to target right in the beginning of the show here. Dustin Johnson is our most expensive golfer this week. He is just a shade under $12,000. He's 11.9. It's a little bit weird to me that he's not really getting, I would say, the recognition for the type of season that he's putting together right now. He's made 11 starts so far in 2019. He has 8 top 10s and 2 victories and 2 runner-ups in majors. So the story has sort of been the runner-ups, I guess, lately. I mean, if that's a knock on the guy, then I wouldn't mind that career for sure. So he's an interesting one this week. We have an extremely top heavy field this week. We have 4 guys in the top 10 of the official World Golf Rankings, which haha, LOL, OWGR, but outside of that, once you get past these 10K guys, you're going to start seeing some names in the mid 9s to high 8s that you're not necessarily used to seeing in this range. I believe it's 32 golfers out of the top 125. So 4 out of the top 10 and only 32 out of the top 125 official world golf rankings. So we're definitely looking at a lot of win equity up top. I'm pretty sure it was Data Golf that tweeted something out to that effect earlier today, that I forget exactly what number of golfers it was, but I'm pulling it up now. So the top, for Data Golf's model at least, the top 10 players in the field this week have almost 60% of the win probability, which is the biggest chunk that the top 10 golfers have had of any full field event this year. So it's definitely skewed towards the top. And I'll get into the rest of this range in a minute here. But I do want to bring up a couple of mid-ish range options that are also getting some buzz this week. Scott Piercy, who's been playing really well lately. He is at 9,300 this week, which you might be thinking, like, what is that? Why? What's happening? Why is Scott Piercy $9,300? And I wouldn't blame you, because with the exception of Corrales, this is the highest price that we've seen him. I went back a couple of years through DK prices, and I couldn't find anything outside of an alternate event that he was this high. So he has that going. Either, depending on how you look at it, he has it going for him or against him. He won here, obviously, in 2012. So he's got 6 straight cuts. He's got a couple of high finishes there. He's won at this track before, and it's a track that we're not really accustomed to seeing that often. So you're definitely looking at a guy in Scott Piercy who will be pretty owned, I would say, even at that price tag, because like I said, it is top heavy, but 9,300 is a pretty palatable price relative to, the rest of the guys that we're going to be looking at once we get into the, mid range here. So I think he's a pretty easy fade for me personally. He's obviously been playing well, but I don't know if I want to pay 9,300 for Scott Piercy when there's a few guys that you could pivot to and feel pretty confident about it. The winner before that is also in the field this week, Jim Furyk at 8,800. He's in the field this week. He's been playing pretty well. The last 2 times that we've seen him, he's around 3.5 strokes gained tee to green. Over that span, he has 5 of his 8 rounds in the 60s, and he's averaging over 70% of greens in regulation and over 75% of his fairways during that stretch. So you're looking at a guy who has been playing very well lately. I know he had a little bit of a hiccup. I believe it was through the RBC Heritage and the PGA. The Heritage is a weird one for me because it feels like that would be kind of set up for him pretty well. The PGA is like, if you were going to design a course that would just stymie Jim Furyk, it especially at this phase in his career, it would look like a lot like Bethpage Black. So I'm not going to hold that against him necessarily. It's that course is just way too long for him. He's not going to run into that issue here. He is all the way up at the top of my top 20 model and gets a reasonable score with in his power ranking as well, which is what I'm sort of, I guess, debuting this week over at RotoViz. It's just a measure of it's a weighted score of how well a golfer has done against the field in the events that he's played. So it's a blend. It has a few different time frames put together. I did some testing and found that there were a couple of time frames in particular weighting that sort of were more predictive than others. So I'm going to throw that into the table this week down at the bottom of the RotoViz article with DraftKings, and we'll see what happens. I've been toying around with it. It's done pretty well over the last couple of weeks, so I hope that you guys like it. I hope it gives you a better feel seeing the top 20 model as well as the power ranking. I think that smooths out some of the inconsistencies that may pop up with the course fit model, where it sort of goes heavy in one direction and overweights something and gets you get some of these really weird like super high scores for guys that you don't understand, or super low scores for guys that you don't understand. So like I said, if you're a sub over there, you can check it out, and I'll be tweaking that as we go along, and we'll see what happens. So those are the three guys sort of above 8,500 that I could see getting pretty popular. DJ, I guess, could see a little bit of an ownership discount, but at almost $12,000, I don't know if you can really find any guys that you would like enough to pay for, like a $6,300 golfer or something ridiculous. I haven't fallen in love with any of those guys yet, but you never know. It could happen. We'll go through and get into the GPP pivots in a minute. I just want to remind you that the Listener League is open right now. We have a 50-man field, $5 to get in, pays the top 3 like usual. The link will be in the iTunes description. And yeah, good luck this weekend. You can hop in with us and test your skills. Evan's not on the show this week, so I am reasonably confident that he will not be making an appearance. So if you're listening to this, tweet him at eChaney17 and tell him to get in, so you could take his money. I'm just trying to pull up the winner here from last week because I didn't give them a shout out yet. Danimal Unhinged came in first this week by a reasonable margin, an 8-point victory. He had Cantlay, Keimer, Leishman, and Spieth, who were all the winner and then all in the top 10. Then he played Glover and Howell. Howell obviously missed the cut, but it didn't matter. When you have 4 guys in the top 10, you're most likely going to take down a 50-person field. So good on him. Really good lineup. Hopefully we can keep seeing some new guys up at the top. Maybe one of these days I will get up there as well. Quick look at my lineup. This would be the point in the show where I would have written in the outline for Evan to point out that my cash locks went 1-2 this week, but I am very modest and I'm not going to do that myself, obviously. So my lineup was very good for the top 3 and very bad for the bottom 3. We had Benyon, Cantlay, and Scott. So 17th, first, and second place, and then 3 miscuts. So still put up 400 points with 3-6 lineup, which could be some kind of a record for me, but wasn't my week with Wise missing the cut on the number, and then Varner and JT just sort of ejecting on Friday. Just wasn't meant to be, which is fine. We're coming for it though. I feel like the process is getting good. Hopefully we can see my name up at the top with Danimal next week. All right, so that's enough babbling. Let's hop into the GPP pivots for this week. I'm really just going to go through here and point out a couple of the guys that the model likes a lot more than sort of their counterparts. Up at the top this week, we have DJ, like I mentioned. We have Brooks, Rory, Kuchar, and JT at 10K and up. The model has Rory and JT tied with DJ slightly behind, and Brooks slightly behind that, and Kuchar coming in last in that range. That pretty much bears itself out in the power ranking as well. So I feel like if it's kind of going to be the same thing as last week, I feel like I'm probably going to play the ownership game with all of these guys getting 83 and up in the top 20 model out of 100. I feel pretty comfortable rostering any of them. So I'm probably just going to play the game theory game and see what I can afford and go from there. And we'll kind of have to wait and see how that's going to shake out. I think we're probably going to end up getting a few withdrawals between the taping of this show and the tee off. So make sure you're following along. Rob Bolton does a really great job getting all those out over at Rob Bolton Golf on Twitter. You can follow the DK Live app. We tweet that stuff out and put it up on the app as well. So if you're concerned at all about missing, those would be two places to keep up to date and figure out who's going to be the reason that we need injury reporting this week. So as we dip down into the 9K range, I have Webb Simpson graded out higher than Scott Piercy. So he's the guy that I was alluding to before. I think that he makes a lot of sense in a vacuum compared to the rest of these guys. I don't know where his ownership is necessarily going to shake out. He has been tagged a reasonable amount so far over at Fanshare. But he's in a range where there's plenty of guys. Like we could see people go, oh, you know what? I'll find the $300 and get myself up to JT, or I'll, save $400 and stay on Piercy, or go down a little bit more and go to Furyk. So I personally like Simpson the best out of the 9K range. A pretty close second in the model is Piercy, but like I said, with ownership shaking out the way that it may, I'm probably going to be steering clear of Scott Piercy. As we continue to go down the salary scale here, and we're in the 8K range, I mentioned before, Jim Furyk is all the way up at the top of the top 20 model. Excuse me while I take a sip real quick. So he got a perfect score from the model this week. He's all the way up at the top. Unfortunately, Keegan is next. I don't see myself throwing too many darts at this range. Bud Cauley makes a little bit of sense to me. Played really exceptionally well last week. Over his past 4 starts, he has positive splits in all of his strokes gained categories compared to his average since the beginning of 2014. Or, well, he probably started playing after that. But basically, he's been outperforming all of his strokes gained categories for his career. So he did miss a cut in that stretch over the past 4 starts. But it didn't really affect his stats. I think he averaged like over 30 putts per round out of those 2 rounds and at Colonial, and just it really did him in. So Cauley's a guy who I could definitely get on board with and find myself rostering quite a bit of him. I'm sure people are going to look at Bjerregaard. I'm sure people are going to play the Canadian angle with Adam Hadwin. I don't really have any interest in either of those guys. Would it shock me if Hadwin did well here? I mean, it wouldn't completely shock me. But a surprising thing that I noticed this week about Hadwin is he actually has, on courses under 7,100 yards, he actually has negative splits in most strokes gained categories. So I don't really know what to make of that. He's a guy that he's not short, off the tee. I would say he's probably around tour average, like 290-ish. But he, for whatever reason, is a little bit hamstrung on these shorter courses. So I don't know. I don't really play a ton of Hadwin on a regular basis, and I don't really see myself starting now. So he's probably more of an avoid for me than anything else. Keep going down the scale here into the 7K range. Aaron Wise got the highest score in the model, and I don't know. I don't think we should find that terribly surprising. I mean, it's you're looking at a guy who obviously missed the cut at Memorial, but he had been playing really well and has just been sort of hamstrung by his putter. He's lost strokes on the greens in 5 straight events and 9 or 8 out of his last 9 events. So maybe that means he's due for some positive regression there. Maybe that means that he's working on something that isn't working. So I don't know. I'll stick with guys that are doing that are kind of losing it off their putter, but doing pretty well elsewhere. I don't mind rostering those guys. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Outside of that, I think that Eam makes a little bit of sense as usual. I think that ZJ makes some sense, and I don't know. I mean, Tway feels like the type of guy who can just completely overpower this course. He went on a streak from, I guess, Phoenix to Valero, where he made 6 starts over the course of 2.5, 3 months and missed every cut, which was obviously concerning, but he bounced back. He made the cut at the Masters, and he's on a streak of 4 made cuts right now. He finished 19th at the Charles Schwab a few weeks ago. If he can keep it reasonably straight and he gains over 2 strokes on approach like he did at the Charles Schwab, and he brings a reasonably average putter, then I don't see why he wouldn't be worth a GPP dart or a top 20 bet or something like that. He, like I said, definitely has the ability to just completely overpower a course. We've talked about it a lot on this show. I know that he's, some of you might be rolling your eyes because he's kind of like a brand play for me, but it's been a while since I mentioned him. And I feel like this is the type of track that he could really do well on. I'm just pulling it up over on RotoViz right now. And yeah, I mean, he does outperform on shorter courses. All of his strokes gained tee to green, he's almost triple on courses under 7,000 yards compared to over 7,000 yards. He's doubles up on approach. He plays well, doubles up off the tee as well. So yeah, I really talked myself into some Kevin Tway. So I'm sure that Jim Furyk at the top of the model and Kevin Tway, getting onto Kevin Tway is going to be really great for this week. As we continue going down, like I said before, this is pretty gross. Peter Uihlein is playing reasonably well lately. He finally sort of figured out, that he was supposed to be a good golfer, and he did a 5th at the Byron and probably like a top 20 at the Schwab. Then he promptly misses the cut at Memorial. I don't know. I think that he makes a little bit of sense here. I'm not going to go crazy on him, but a score of almost 70 in the power rankings for this range is pretty significant. So he's somebody that I'll keep an eye on. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, this is gross. Like, you're looking at the Harris Englishes of the world and the Dylan Fratellis of the world down here. Like, KH Lee's playing really well, so I could get on board with him at 7,400. I think he makes a little bit of sense. You have the other Canadian, or one of the other Canadians, Corey Connors, in the field at 7,500. He's been just god awful with his putter over the past 5 starts. He's losing 2.5 strokes on the greens. Obviously, that's something that could turn around. Am I banking on it? Not really. He completely lost it on approach the last time that we saw him, losing 3 strokes in that category. So not terribly optimistic about his chances here. Ryan Armour is a guy that popped a little bit in the model relative to the rest of this range. We got Billy Haas down here scoring pretty well at 7,100. And that's not something that I'm super stoked about. But in this field, a guy like him at 7,100, who's made 4 of his last 5 cuts, I mean, I would be hard pressed to feel like he has no shot at a top 30 here, which at 7,100 and probably pretty low ownership could pay off decently, or at least it won't kill you. After that, good old Hank Lebioda popped in the model again. Big surprise for everybody, I'm sure. He was a little bit disappointing, obviously missing the cut. I guess that was the Byron Nelson. But he had been playing really well coming into that. He's put together a pretty decent season for his first real full season on tour. And I could see, 6,700. I could see a made cut here. Wouldn't really be too shocking. Lashley is another guy who popped for the power ranking score this week. Julian Etelane is another guy who popped in the power ranking score, and that's 6,400. That's the absolute lowest even that I will even consider, and I probably won't even be going this low. I think I'm probably going to live in that 7K range and load up on some of the guys that I mentioned up at the top that I can afford. So that probably means that it's not really a week that I'm going to get onto DJ, unless it just seems like his ownership is going to be super low. But yeah, he's a guy who should be, I don't know, 35% owned every single week, regardless of price, regardless of field, regardless of anything else. And he just at 11.9 could go a little bit underappreciated this week and under rostered. So obviously make sure that you stay up to date with your ownership projections of choice. I hope that choice is over at RotoViz with my model, but if not, just play the game up there for ownership, because it could get pretty concentrated depending on how the next 24 hours go between podcasts coming out and articles coming out and stuff like that. So I think that makes you should definitely it makes sense to follow along with that. All right, why don't we hit the cash locks and get ourselves out of here? We've been going for about 28 minutes now, and I need to loosen up the vocal cords for a sec here and think about who I'm going to do for my cash locks. So I think this is one of those things where I'm going to have to really trust the model. And DJ is the top of the power rankings. He's 4th in the top 20 model. or I hate calling it the top 20 model, the course fit model. So I'll go DJ, and I will go Jimmy Furyk for 8,800 for the cheaper guy. I don't know if you're gonna be able to feel comfortable putting both of those guys together in a ton of lineups, but I think that it makes a lot of sense to try and get at least one of them in most of your lineups. So those will be my 2 cash locks for the week. Thank you for coming along on the ride with us this week, even though I'm flying solo. We will be back next week for the US Open, and we will have a special announcement about a contest that I'm running that you may or may not hear about on Twitter before then, but stay tuned for next week, and we'll see if we could talk some football as well. So that's going to do it for the show tonight. Make sure you hop in the Listener League. Make sure you're following along on Twitter at MattJonesTFR. And good luck this weekend. See ya.